Testing, testing. Weird. Simon or Dan or whoever actually watches this. There we go. There's Bobby. Hey, Bobby, the only way I could get this to go was to go live first.
Okay.
So we're technically already recording, and then I'll just have Simon or Dan cut off the beginning part, I guess.
All right.
And there's Grant. I'll re-explain it to you. Grant, we're already Grant's gone. That was his contribution to the night.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, anyhow, so Simon, Dan, whoever's watching this, it wasn't letting me invite them and then start recording, so I don't know why, but we're recording. Just cut off this beginning part, and hopefully that works out for you. There's Grant again.
What now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you before.
Now we don't even get to have a conversation about like how we're doing in life and everything, just because we have to go straight to the show. Sad.
We'll have to use modern technology of text messages to keep up.
Or just incorporate it.
Dude, remember when here's Grant again.
So I'm tethering through my phone. Let's see if this works this time.
Through your phone?
Yeah, so I'm at a hotel right now and their internet's just terrible.
All right. So we'll try this again. We're already recording because that was the only way I could get this to work. So everything
Nice
you
start.
say,
Nice to hear, Grant.
everything you say will be heard live. That's not true. I'm sure they'll just cut off the audio at the beginning. But anyhow, you guys ready to start?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'm turning off my camera so you guys can't just watch me.
I just found out I'm not going to win $100,000 tonight.
Did you have a shot?
I mean, I had a reasonable shot. I've been absolutely massacring basketball. I've been playing I'm doing like your style. I'm playing like 2 lineups a night, and
yeah,
somehow I end up with a top 5 finish every night that I play pretty much.
Dude, so this last week in football, I built, I got a super late start because I was sick all week. So I literally didn't start building lineups till like Saturday morning. And I built 50 lineups, like just messing around with things. I threw them all in the quarter arcade to track how they would do. I used Kirk Cousins in 47 of those lineups, but used Kaepernick in my main lineup.
Oh, shit.
It was like Sunday morning that I was like, I'm going to use Kaepernick.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, so I also took a 0 from Curly and still cashed in double ups because the rest of my team was pretty solid. But I had Garcon on like 40% of the practice teams I built, Kaepernick on like 90 or Cousins on 95%, and then didn't use either of them on my actual team. So
yeah, that's crazy. It's funny that Curly actually had 6 targets and he still had 0.
It ended up being like a minimally profitable weekend just because of double ups, as opposed to would have been massively profitable with about 60% of the other teams I built just messing around with things. So,
jeez, man.
But crazy. Oh well, it is what it is. Well, we're all going to keep making big money over time. So
yeah,
no $100,000 for you tonight, no big weekend for me, but we'll just keep plugging away.
I was literally a Chris Paul rebound away from another $25,000 the other night. That actually hurt.
God, that's the thing, man. Basketball is nuts. I remember when I was still playing it. One time I got I think it was Gobert, missed a shot, got his rebound, missed a shot, got his rebound, and then made the shot, and that bumped me up to a double and made me like an extra $6,000 or $7,000 just because he missed a couple shots.
It's so volatile.
Yeah, so volatile. Like the margin of error is so slim in basketball. But all right, I was about to say I'm going to press start record, but we're already recording. So just pause for a second, and then I'll start talking if we're all good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Week 12 absolutely epic early week podcast. also known as the Thanksgiving edition, which basically means we're recording it on Thanksgiving week. Does not mean that we have anything special prepared for you, Thanksgiving themed or Thanksgiving wise. But I'm sure most of you will be with friends, family this week, maybe looking for some downtime. So I imagine that you are listening to us as a little escape from some craziness around friends and family. So welcome. Glad you could hang out with us. And also hanging out with us is Bobby Firestone and Grant Neefer. Bobby, I'll kick it off to you. How you doing, man?
Not bad, man. Really happy that basketball is back in full swing, and football wasn't too bad to me either, but mostly looking forward to this week with family and friends, and happy to be hanging out with you guys tonight.
Do you play the Thanksgiving Day slate, the 3-game slate?
You know what? Since so many people do, and they fill up faster than any tournaments on DraftKings and FanDuel, I tend to try to play like every kind of tournament I possibly can on those days and sneak away and do whatever I have to do in between. But yeah, I definitely play a lot on those days.
Yeah, I used to. I mean, let's see. This is my third football season in DFS, and I've played each of the last 2 on Thanksgiving. But each week leading up, I argued against them because I'm like, a 3-game slate is basically just throwing darts and hoping. But then by the time you get to Thursday, it's like, I'd like to play this slate. Profitable both years. I don't think I'll have. Abby's family has some land in Oklahoma, and that's where we are doing Thanksgiving, and they don't have internet out there, or 4G really. So I'm guessing I will not be playing this week, but maybe I'll be able to hold my phone up and find some 4G and throw something in.
I'll build a lineup for you, send it your way. My secondary lineup. Just you can scrutinize it all you want.
We also have Grant Neefer, which, by the way, I don't know how many Twitter followers Grant and Bobby pick up from this show because we never actually say their Twitter handles. But Bobby is pretty easy. It's Bobby Fi, Bobby Fi. Grant is GNEIFER07. Because Grant.
FF.
So anyhow, yeah, GNEIFER07. If you want to.
2 Fs.
Oh, 2 Fs. I couldn't understand what you were saying. So NEIFFER. Nobody's going to follow you now after that. But yeah, you kind of probably missed out on some of the crazy tweets because you don't know how to spell Grant's name. I don't know how to spell Grant's name, apparently. So I'm going to throw it over to Grant for Grant's rant, which we may have just had with the 2 Fs thing.
Nah, I'm okay with misspelling it. I still misspell it sometimes. Actually, every week I misspell my own name. That's beside the point. I'm going to give you some Grant Neefer list of don'ts. Don't wash your hands after peeing. All you have to do is pull your pants down to your ankles and lift your shirt up. You never actually touch anything down there. On the way out, just turn on the sink and then turn it off. Never actually have to touch water or dry your hands. Also, don't shake my hand because I probably haven't washed them. Don't rotate your tires or change your oil. Trump is now president. We can live a little dangerously. Don't trust women except for your mom. Don't trust your mom because she said I was the most handsome guy in the world, and People magazine just said that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is. And don't start Kessler or Goff. I was playing on aces. I had multiple lineups with both Bell and David Johnson in them, and I didn't cash because I had Kessler and Goff in there, and they just killed me everywhere.
I don't know how seriously anybody can take you now that you've said that you started Kessler and Goff on a joint team.
That's exactly what I said, Jay. I'm like, I loved the rest of it, and then he just killed it with that ending.
With David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell, I mean, that's beautiful. And then
I had them and Jennings. I had literally them and Jennings in 30% of my lineups on DraftKings. I only played 3 running backs, and somehow I still was just maybe marginally profitable to even, depending on what happens. Or no, won a little bit. I'm slightly profitable, but. Man, that's crazy. How could you possibly start those two?
Aces has a weird pricing differential where they're just so much cheaper than everyone else. And I felt like just hoping for a touchdown pass from both of them. And then my balls just got left out in the cold.
That's fair. I mean, it's like to do it, to be able to fit in Bell and David Johnson. I can't fault you for it. I don't think I'd do it myself, but why kick a good man when he's down? So Yeah, I mean, I can see the rationale with the pricing over there. But yeah, so that's I said that as if it was a conversation, and then neither of my cohorts responded. So we had some awkward
Agreed,
silence.
Jam. Agreed.
You're a smart man. You're a smart man.
Now this is what we talked about, how to improve the audio quality. We all throw our mics on mute when we're not talking, which then seems like a whole hassle just to take your mic off mute to say something like, "Yeah, I agree." So we're going to jump into week 12, and first we have some punishment to dole out. So last week in our bold calls, for new listeners, we all make a bold call at the end. The loser has to post an embarrassing tweet of the other's choosing. So hopefully, if you're a new listener, you now understand why I've had some weird tweets the last couple of weeks. But this last week I said Colin Kaepernick would have 25 points. He had 19. Grant said Tom Brady would not be in the top half of quarterbacks. That was obviously wildly incorrect. And Bobby said Quentin Patton would be, I believe, the top point per dollar wide receiver and have at least 20 points. Was that right, Bobby?
Yeah, just shoot me in the face.
So I think Patton had 1.7. Along those lines, I did use Jeremy Curley myself and got a 0 on 6 targets.
Yeah, Mr. Kaepernick and Curley. If you have one lineup, are you serious? So I still feel like I may be the loser, but in some way you're the loser because it was against your team too.
Yeah, but I had the rationale made sense.
Of course,
with their don't break defense,
which is why I took Quentin Patton.
But yeah, and it was, thankfully I had, I don't think too much about ownership percentages in cash, which I think is the way to go. You just make the best plays, or what you feel are the best plays. And I had Dez, who was 2% owned or 3% owned, and put up 26 points. And then I had Curley, who was 5% owned and put up 0 points. So just still worked out in double ups, but not the best week in tournaments with what most people would call a tournament team.
Goff and Kessler both outscored Curley and Patton.
That is accurate. So anyhow, with all that said, my bold call was the least awful. I was thinking about this today. Nobody really wins in this. It's just losing or not losing. So I didn't lose. Bobby and Grant have sportingly both agreed to take a loss this week. So I came up with Grant's tweet, and then Grant will have something for Bobby to choose from, or a couple things for Bobby to choose from. But let me read you the tweet we have for Grant first. Now, if you're a new listener, I want you to know that this is the most embarrassing thing Grant could ever have to tweet. So if Grant comes up with something about bubble baths or Taylor Swift or Nickelback, those are all things that are embarrassing for me to post and very normal for Grant to post. Here's something that is very normal for me to post because this is the way I basically eat, but is the most embarrassing thing Grant could possibly post on his Twitter. So this is what we have. I started making the shift this weekend to vegan eating. I'm really impressed with the changes I'm seeing already. So Grant, we will see that tweet from you. If you can, throw it up on Tuesday instead of Monday night so people will see it prime tweeting time. And then let's see what you have for Bobby this week.
My name is Bobby Firestone, and I love Nickelback. How the hell I wind up like this? Hashtag Nickel Life. Hashtag boom, love Nickelback.
Is that under 140 characters?
I doubt it.
It sounds like 400 characters. What is that?
It's good.
Just throw as much in as you can.
Oh my God. Okay. It'll just go, my name is Bobby Firestone. ...
Oh, 140 characters.
Yep. All right, Grant, what's the other ones?
Nope. Just
That's
that.
it? Just that.
You had a real bad call, and I have the worst tweet possible for me, so I want you to feel my pain.
Oh my goodness.
So look for a Nickelback tweet from Bobby tomorrow. Feel free to retweet it so that we can get Bobby, just keep adding to his followers, and as they see that Bobby's a big Nickelback fan. So.
Oh my God. At least it's not Creed.
Quick note on that. So I picked up late summer. I picked up like 4,000 extra followers when Evan Silva tweeted out something about loving my stuff. And then the other day, Jeff El Jefe retweeted my Little Mermaid bubble bath tweet, and Evan Silva texted in a text thread with Jeff and Levitan and Evan and me to say, JM, what the hell is this? And then he said that he was going to retweet it as well, which I was very concerned I would lose all the followers I picked up from him. So thankfully he did not retweet it. I don't know how people feel about me buying lobsters and taking Little Mermaid bubble baths with bubble boobs. Retweet Grant, retweet Bobby. Let's razz them real good on these. And in the meantime, let's move on to week 12. And we're going to start with Trend or Trap, as we always do, talking about 5 things that from this last week and whether they are something we can expect to continue moving forward, something that we want to take advantage of, or if it's instead a trap. Fittingly, the first thing we're going to talk about is Jared Goff equals awful. I remember I watched this. I remember it was like 2 days ago. Yesterday, I watched the game or parts of that Rams game, and the announcers were saying something about Jared Goff at quarterback opening up running lanes for Todd Gurley. And it was like, wait, what? Because Case Keenum was, a gunslinger. He's not good, but he's out there slinging the ball around, throwing downfield. Goff had 5 passes that traveled at least 10 yards. All of them were incomplete. So Goff is facing the Saints this week. If Goff, I was about to say, I don't think anybody has interest in rostering Goff. Maybe I'm wrong. But if Goff is as bad as he looked, then the Saints will probably just play one-on-one on the outside and load up, to stop the run. Even though they're an awful run defense, it would make it tough to use Gurley. If Goff is actually good, some of his receivers might be viable. That could open things up for Gurley. So, Grant, I'm going to start with you since you rostered Goff this last weekend. How bad is Jared Goff, and are his receivers usable this week against the Saints? Is Todd Gurley usable this week against the Saints? What do you think?
He's not as bad as everyone thinks he is, which is to say he's not the worst QB of all time. Thank you, Ryan Leaf. But he is probably the worst QB in the NFL. But that being said, site dependent on a site like Aces, you could probably use him if you have just stone hard rocks down there. And I think that a lot of his receivers are actually going to be usable, and I think Gurley's even usable. It's against a terrible New Orleans defense. They're going to have to be throwing because they're going to be coming from behind. And I think that I wouldn't trust them horribly, and it's always a price play. But Austin, Britt, and Gurley could all rack up some yards out of the receiving game from way back there because they're going to run a real conservative offense to the first half, and then when they're getting blown out, they'll probably be slinging it downfield, and Austin can always go off for a huge play. And I think Gurley had his first rush over 20 yards on the entire season this last game against a Miami defense that I don't think is great, but a lot of stats tend to show that they are a better defense than they have been in the past. So I think that all 3 of those guys are in play, and if you're really, really, really ballsy, throw Goff in because you never know what will happen. It could have just been a rough play, and I think that was one of the games that was affected by weather.
Yeah, weather is a tough excuse to use for how bad Goff was, but I do agree with a lot of that. I'm still kind of iffy on how I feel on all this, but definitely some good points there. Bobby, what's your take on this situation at the game against New Orleans?
I want to start off by saying that I'm not going to be one of those people who just says Jared Goff is a terrible quarterback. What happened in that game, they literally tried to play as safe, as conservative as possible, gave him absolutely no chance to actually succeed, which wasn't even their fault. They were actually going to win the game, if not for a few weird, fluky things. We should stop calling players bad and maybe say they're not fantasy worthy. Same way people say Russell Westbrook is not a good defensive player. He's one of the best 5 defensive players in his position in the NBA. But his fantasy points against don't equal up to that because he either uses his energy on offense or they have a different player guard the one. It's just a different thing. Let's just not say players are bad because their numbers don't show they are. Okay, Goff has a good future. He's capable. He's competent. It's not a week I'm going to use him against the Saints. but he's not a bad player. It's not all him. It's that team. It's the team has nothing. They really have no identity, and they're doing what they can with what they have. And they're going to build a running game at some point when they can get a good run blocking line. Gurley's still a top 5 running back in the NFL. I think he is viable this week, but Goff is still not probably playable. Maybe for the millionaire maker or something like that, in case he does actually have one of those weird fluky times and New Orleans can give up those games. But in general, I just don't think we should call him a terrible quarterback or how bad he was. I watched that game. It was the play calling too. I mean, they didn't really give him a chance to actually make anything happen ever. And he played it conservatively and looked like a real good game manager up until they blew a 10-0 lead in the fourth quarter. That's it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah, he has no piece around him, so it is on a fantasy basis. And maybe right now he's not a good quarterback, but that's different from his future. I mean, Peyton Manning, first year in the league, he was not a good quarterback, but that doesn't change how bright his future is. Just this year, he's not going to play very well, and he has nothing around him.
That was like Bobby's rant for the week. That's a new segment. That's your Thanksgiving special. Yeah, so I have not watched like this game in its entirety yet. I have, read up on the game, and so as far as what you're saying about the play calling makes a lot of sense. And if the Saints are going to put up points, that does change some things as far as how they might call this game. I would be hard pressed to take Kenny Britt. I would be hard pressed to take. It's weird. Tavon Austin was hardly involved at all this last week. He would set up perfectly for a game manager type game because you just throw these short passes to him. But that could change. And I do like Gurley this next week to an extent against the Saints. But definitely, this is going to be a different game than against Miami because Miami was missing 2 offensive linemen and still trying to run their run-heavy approach. So, we knew it was going to be low scoring. This game will be a little different and will impact the way the Rams have to play it for sure. The next thing I want to talk about, and Bobby, I'll start with you first on this one, is Carson Palmer being the walking dead. Carson Palmer, I have not used him this year against the Panthers, against the Jets. I mean, he just looks bad. But he's playing an Atlanta defense that I believe has given up the most passing touchdowns in the league. They're not a horrible pass defense, but just the nature of the way they play, putting points on the board, they do allow a lot of quarterback production. So Carson Palmer is, I believe, 5,300 this week on DraftKings. So my question, Bobby, is whether you'll have interest in using Palmer just because of the spot. And the expectation right now is Desmond Trufant will play in the slot a lot against Larry Fitzgerald. So then the question is, do you like any of the outside receivers as well, or would you still feel comfortable with Fitz? What are your thoughts on this spot?
I'm happy to go with everyone in this game. I do think that he's past his prime and all that. If they can get a little bit of protection, you could see a 4-touchdown game anytime. There's just so many weapons on that team. I don't really care. I'm not looking at Fitzgerald specifically. Other than that, though, there's so many options. I'm going to probably, because I do play a lot of lineups, I will sprinkle a little bit of each of them in. And I think Carson Palmer is a viable play. I mean, he may not be the same guy, but honestly, 2 of the worst 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, and you're going to laugh at this first one. No, you're going to laugh at the second one. The first one is Blake Bortles, has put up 2 of the better fantasy performances of the year, point per dollar. The other guy who's put up the majority of them, the best point per dollar producer so far, I believe, Marcus Mariota, is a terrible quarterback. So I don't think you have to be a great quarterback to succeed in fantasy when you have weapons or situations that lend themselves to your benefit. This is one of those for Carson Palmer and the entire Arizona offense, in my opinion. And honestly, I'm in love with David Johnson. I just want to play him all the time. But you can play him together with Palmer. There's no wrong play on that team, in my opinion, this week.
I wouldn't mind spending a little more time on the Mariota as an awful quarterback thing, but
an awful real-life quarterback, a guy who's not winning you games. Watch these games that happened. Watch these games where he put up Look who they were against. Look how the situations played out. I'm just saying, as a real quarterback, when he has an incredible amount of time and wide open receivers, he's awesome. When he doesn't,
along those lines, looking at Pro Football Focus ratings, again, for anybody who doesn't know, Pro Football Focus, they watch one person's assigned to one player to watch them and grade them for every play in every game. So in other words, somebody sits there and watches every single play of the Titans game and grades, say, the left tackle on every play. Anyhow, Mariota ranks 24th behind Carson Palmer, behind Cody Kessler. With that said, Ben Roethlisberger ranks 21st. So, I mean, take it all with a grain of salt. But I guess Roethlisberger hasn't really been that good this year, though, outside of a few home games. Anyhow, back on track. Grant, what's your take on Carson Palmer and this situation against Atlanta?
So he's not that very good anymore. He's old. One of the big problems is I think he got hit 18 times this last game, and he's been getting beat up most of the season so far. But one thing that you really have to look at is last 4 games against the Seahawks, 49 attempts, 46 attempts, 49 attempts, 38 against the Vikings, which are a tough defense. And he's put up 3 out of the last 4 games over 300 yards, and a Seahawks game, which was a fluke, and he didn't score any touchdowns. He put up 3, 2, and 1 touchdowns. So as a fantasy quarterback against the worst defense in the league, which the 2 times he played a terrible pass defense was Tampa Bay and Carolina, and he got, I think 30 points in both those games. He is definitely in play this week. I'm a little bit worried about his health because of what happened last game, but he can easily put up a 300-yard game and multiple touchdowns. The one thing that scares me is that David Johnson is there, but I think he could be catching the ball a lot out of the backfield this week because, the Atlanta defense is just terrible, just horrible against the pass. And I think that Fitzgerald is hugely in play. I think he has the 3rd most targets in the league right now, and he's a great cash and tournament play just because his floor and ceiling are high if he breaks one off or if he ends up with 10 receptions because they're throwing the ball so much. So I think that Palmer is a great play considering that he's $100 more than Jared Goff this week. And speech.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was looking up some stats, so I had to navigate back over to take my mic off mute. I think I'm less high on Palmer than you guys are. He played the Jets as well, week 6, and put up 12.4 fantasy points, which the Jets are a worse pass defense than Atlanta. Atlanta does rank 22nd in DVOA against the pass. I think they're actually top 15 in yards allowed per pass attempt, but they allow a ton of touchdown passes. They allow, a lot of fantasy production from quarterbacks. I love David Johnson this week. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. But Atlanta is 14th in yards allowed per pass attempt. But in touchdowns allowed, only one team has allowed more passing touchdowns than Atlanta. So, they're basically second to last in touchdown passes allowed. Palmer's just been, really bad. The yards, it's interesting. The fact that they're probably going to have to throw is interesting. I'll definitely spend a lot of time this week thinking about this game. I am concerned about how bad Carson Palmer is, but his weapons are still in play. He's still in play. David Johnson is hugely in play. So lots to think about there. Bobby, I'm going to start with you again on this one because you said you use this guy in about 30% of your lineups. I did not use him at all. He was not on my radar at all because I thought that, Ben McAdoo has been running a timeshare in New York for the last 2 years, basically. But this last week, Rashad Jennings was the lead back after being the lead back in the 4th quarter the week before. And this week he is facing the Browns, who are, alongside the 49ers as the worst run defenses in football. So, Bobby, Rashad Jennings' usage, is this for real or is it a trap? I'm guessing I know where you're going with your answer, considering you used him last week, but what are your thoughts?
After watching that game against Cincinnati, as I've said a couple times on the show, the guys who own the bar down the street from where I lived, I just moved, by the way, they're all from Cincinnati. They're obsessed with the Bengals. So after watching that game, it wasn't that he had such a spectacular game. It was more just about the usage, that it was clear that he was their top running back in a tight game, that he was the guy they were going to go to, and that he has some real fantasy value. And this last week, he more than proved it. He was 3,600. Even in this great matchup against Cleveland this week upcoming, I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong, he'll be in some of my lineups, but I don't know if I'll use him more than I did last week. I doubt that I will. I knew people would be off him. I knew he was 3,600, and I thought he was going to get a bulk of the carries in a situation that was going to be, unpredictable, but with huge upside. And as a GPP player, like, he seemed like a very obvious play to me at 3,600. I actually thought he was cash game viable because at worst, I couldn't see him getting less than 10 to 12 points. So, but at the same time, this week at 5,600, I don't know if I feel the same way. But in general, I do think he is the main back. I just would like to see his price a little lower. Otherwise, I would say probably use him on all the smaller sites where the pricing hasn't caught up yet, but I wouldn't use him on DraftKings.
Yeah, the interesting thing about his usage is, he started out with 19 touches in week 1, and then it was 15 touches, then 13, then 15, then 14. And so they've been, last year was a 3 or 4 man committee all year. This year they started out with him as the lead back, and then they went back to a 2-man committee, then a 3-man committee. It's been such a mess. But I think if the usage is there, like if you expect him to get 20 touches, even at 5,600 against the Browns, it's a great play. The question is, how reliable is this usage? Considering that a lot of ownership is going to flow there. 5,600 against the Browns is still a great deal. So there should be a lot of ownership. So then the question is, is he really the lead back? Or, is this going to go crazy on us again? Then you want to shift to better places to look. So I don't have the answer, but it is an interesting situation where he's seen, he saw 27 touches last week out of nowhere. I guess not out of nowhere. He had 18 the week before, but 27 is by far his high. So interesting situation there all the way around. Grant, what's your take on Rashad Jennings, his usage, his viability this week?
So I think he's actually viable even at that price this week because, it's not that high and it's going to keep people on it. So it's a possibility in GPPs. But you also have to look at the previous weeks that were giving him a problem. You look at his longest rush starting in the first week he played, 17, 7, 5, 5, 6. So he wasn't breaking off any big rushes, where last year I think he had like several over 30 and like 7 or 8 over 20 yards. So it's one of those things where the last 2 weeks we've seen him break off a long rush. Then you have to look at the game script. If they're ahead, which they most likely are going to be versus Cleveland, then they're going to be running the ball, and I think he's the guy that they give the ball to. So there's that. And then on top of that, it's one of those things where he gets catches out of the backfield, which we didn't see that much earlier on in the season, but now last few outings he's had at least 3 receptions in every single one. He can easily break off a long one. So I think that his usage will be there, especially with how he's performed lately. I think that he has upside because he can break a long run off, and the only thing I'm worried about is touchdowns, but I even think then they don't have a whole lot to – well, they have a little bit to throw to in the end zone with Beckham and a few other guys, but it's one of those things where the game script points to him getting enough usage because they'll be ahead late in the game.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns, Grant, about – so the Giants are 7-3. They're clearly primed to be a playoff team. They want to keep guys fresh. Do you have any concern that they might, just close out the game with Paul Perkins for a quarter if they have a huge lead, or you think that Jennings will get most of that work?
I don't think they'll have a huge lead. I think they'll have a lead. Browns have kept it close in most games this season. I don't have everything in front of me right now, but I can't remember how bad the game was last week, but that was weird conditions, a game where Bell just went off, and it was one of those things. I can't remember the score off the top of my head, but most games this season, they've actually kept it close nearly every single time. I'm not sure what Kessler's status is for the game this week.
He's out. It'll be Mccown playing.
So then the game's going to be close. McCown's going to throw it 50 times, and it's going to be a close game, I think, because I think he's a much better player than Kessler is and a much better quarterback, both fantasy and real life. And I think that this game is not going to be that far out of hand. You look at Giants games all season. I don't think they have a win of over 7 points the entire season. Yeah,
to that point, they're favored by 7. So it's similar to last week. Obviously, that Steelers Browns line came out before the weather was an issue. But last week, the thought is, oh God, the Steelers are going to have this huge lead. Can you use Le'Veon Bell? If they're just going to be up by 14, are they going to leave him in the whole fourth quarter? But they were only favored by like 7 or 7.5. As a road team, yeah, it's a good point that this game's not going to get just out of hand. The Giants are favored by 7. It's not like they're a 16-point favorite or something. Bobby, any final thoughts on the Rashad Jennings situation?
Just that I don't disagree. He's playable. There are other spots I like better this week. I prefer Gurley, but for a little bit less. But I understand playing him. I think he's got real value going forward.
One fun fact: Giants are 7-0 with Jennings playing. They're 0-3 without him.
That's interesting. You would think that a coach would. Obviously Jennings has been valuable on the field too, so you'd think a coach would pay attention to that. Who knows what goes through coaches' heads though. I definitely like Rashad Jennings this week against the Browns. I hate that he's going to absorb all this ownership, and so I'll obviously be looking for other spots that I think might potentially be better. But early week, I think he's a strong play. Grant, I want to start with you on this one, and that is the Seahawks offense. So they were, for a couple of weeks there, really spreading the field out and running more of a spread attack. This last week, they shifted back to more what we expect from the Seahawks, which is kind of their old Marshawn Lynch model of running the ball and then passing off of that. So the question is basically what type of offense we think they'll be this week, and if that even matters against the Bucks, because for one, Thomas Rawls is now all that the Seahawks have at running back. They were using a quarterback in the backfield in the fourth quarter this last week to try to keep Rawls fresh on the sideline until he hurt his ankle and Rawls had to come back in. So Rawls is all they have, so he'll get the work regardless. And then the matchup's good enough for Russ that he should be able to do well even if they're not spreading it out. So that's basically is how you think that we should evaluate the Seahawks offense and whether it really even matters, if the pass and run are both viable this week.
So Russell was my favorite QB and Baldwin was my favorite wide receiver this last week. And it's not going to change at all now. We've seen this before. Once the offensive line starts to come together at the second half of the season, I'm assuming because Cable actually does a good job on the offensive line and does some work throughout the course of the season, they always tend to come together the second half. Russell Wilson's healthy. He's getting his connection back with Baldwin. Rawls was by far the best running back on that team. Prosise added a little bit of a change of pace back, but Rawls really opens things up on the running portion of the game. I think that Russell Wilson is the best play at quarterback this week, and Baldwin is primed for a huge game, and their ownership's still not even going to be that high because people always take a little while to get back on the train there. I think that now that Russell can run or even catch passes or throw the ball, it doesn't matter from any part of the game, he is going to be the best fantasy quarterback throughout the rest of the season, and Baldwin's going to be a top 3 to 5 wide receiver the rest of the season.
I can't argue with those calls. I like those a lot. Bobby, thoughts on this situation with the Seahawks?
I can argue with them. I don't know that I agree. I agree with Russell Wilson. I like it more as in a sneaky situation. I'm not going to take him when he's highly drafted. My favorite thing about him is that he's been low priced and fairly low owned for the most part, and that I thought you were buying low on him. I don't know that generally buying in on him in a week in, week out basis is good, especially for cash games. I do think there is some volatility there. I think they can score enough defensively, and I think Rawls is good enough. And whatever they figure out, they seem to have rejuvenated that line a little bit. I think don't get me wrong, I love Russell Wilson, but to say that Doug Baldwin is going to be a top 3 to 5 receiver the rest of the way, I just think is a little bit of a stretch. I would say maybe 15 to 20, but I don't think that a top 3 to 5 receiver is anywhere near accurate. You better hope AJ Green stays out for a long time, Antonio Brown gets hurt, and Julio Jones somehow breaks his ankle or something, because there's no way he's going to end up being a top 3 to 5 receiver the rest of the way.
Like the
I
second
hope-
half of last season.
I hope somebody tuned in just to hear, just for the part where you said, you better hope that AJ Green's out for the season and Julio Jones breaks his foot or whatever.
That's not what I meant, obviously. I love those guys.
They're
Julio
like,
Jones,
oh my God, these people are horrible people.
Believe me, hey, look, I absolutely love these guys. I wish no harm on anyone, especially AJ Green, who hit between him and Shady McCoy, destroying my lineups like right into the freaking day, right, getting injured. That really hurt. So I don't wish any harm on them for sure, but it was, I'm just saying that it would take a miracle for Doug Baldwin to be a top 3 to 5 receiver the rest of this particular season.
But you are on board with like him being a top, say he could be top 12 to 15 the rest of the way, right?
Yeah, 12 to 15 sounds reasonable. I would have him pegged 15 to 20. I just don't think. I think there's enough viable receiving options. I think they've done a concerted effort to try and stop Jimmy Graham, and it's left him a little bit more room. I think he's an excellent receiver. He's one of the best route runners. He's one of the best pure receivers. He's not as fast. He's not as athletic. He just doesn't have the talent and the targets to keep up with the guys who I think are going to be the top 10. But yeah, 12 to 15, that's reasonable. I think 15 to 20, but 12 to 15 reasonable.
All right. Yeah, I mean, regardless, it's basically saying, we all agree that he's a strong play moving forward. Russ is a strong play moving forward. Bobby, any really quick thoughts on Rawls this week as well?
Yeah, I'm interested in Rawls. I think his ownership will be lower than it probably should be. And I like the way that guy runs. He's not David Johnson. He's not, Lynch. He's not these guys, but he has some huge play ability, just the way he tries to run over people. That's similar. He's just very hard to tackle if he can ever get space. And if he does a couple times in the game, and then on top of it, you get another 15 to 20 carries, you're looking at an absolutely massive game. So, and situationally, they should always be in a good spot, running the ball often with a lot of different kinds of play calling. So, yeah, I think he's a viable play going forward for sure.
Right on. The last place we want to look, and Bobby, I'll start with you on this one, and that is, so this week we have Oakland and Carolina are going to be playing. Earlier this year, that would have been, both teams have spent time as the number 32 pass defense. So any listeners who are not familiar with Football Outsiders DVOA statistics, they basically normalize everything as far as account for matchups, situations, broken plays, all sorts of stuff like that, to come up with a rating for each defense. And then it's weighted more heavily toward, I believe, the last 4 games than toward the entire season. So at this point, so like I said, Oakland and Carolina have both spent time as the number 32 DVOA pass defense. Both defenses have improved. Oakland is now 24th DVOA against the pass. Carolina is now 19th. So earlier this season, this would have been like the clearest spot on the slate to just load up on quarterbacks, load up on passing games, especially the Oakland side, because Carolina stops the run well and then is poor against the pass. The question that I want to explore is whether the improvements to these defenses I don't think anybody's going to say Carr or Cam are bad plays, but Bobby, do the improvements on these defenses give you some pause on these guys and maybe lead you to say, okay, they're not the best plays on the weekend, or are they still going to be right up there with your favorite plays on the weekend?
There's absolutely 0% chance that I will be taking either Carr or Cam. Okay, now let me take that back. I might take Cam in about, at the moment, maybe 10% of my tournaments, but there's no way I'm taking Carr in anything. The defenses are rejuvenated. It's a very different situation. Maybe Cam getting a tired, Oakland secondary coming back from Mexico City, and I do think there's more holes there. I actually think Carolina's figured out their defense pretty well, even though the numbers may not always show it lately. They've drastically improved it. The eye test will tell you a lot of things, and they are much, much, much better than the numbers will show. I have no interest in the other side of the ball, but I do think Cam is always viable. Like, I don't even care what the matchup is. If he has one of his games, if you're playing GPPs and you're playing more than 40 lineups, you should have him in a lineup against Denver, against everybody. There is not one team he can't light it up against. Guys like that, don't come often. There's very few spots where when it comes to quarterbacks that can absolutely destroy other quarterbacks. It's quarterbacks that can rush for not just one, but possibly multiple touchdowns. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying having that possibility with guys like him and Russell Wilson who can break off or maybe run for 100 yards in the game. Unlikely for him, more likely for Russell. But anyway, these guys have huge value all the time. So yes, I'll always be looking at them in tournaments, but it's not like an especially good week. And those numbers lie, honestly. These defenses are much better than that, in my opinion.
Grant, what are your thoughts on this situation, on these defenses, on these passing games?
So in terms of Cam, I agree with Bobby wholeheartedly. Like he's a great play this week. Just always worried about the fact that he's not rushing it on the goal line as much as he used to be. But in terms of the Carolina defense, like, yeah, you say they look good, but they've also played – last 4 games have been New Orleans, Kansas City, L.A., and Arizona, which are all subpar offenses with maybe Arizona
Whoa. Wait. Did we just say New Orleans was a subpar offense?
On the road, yes.
I mean, that's really unfair, though. I mean, they what did they put on KC? What did Drew Brees throw for? 500 yards, 400, whatever yards?
They're still a good offense. They're
good offense, man. They're a top 10 offense in the league, and that's really, really selling them short. They may be top 7.
On the road, I would put them at just right at mid-range.
Wrong.
I'm done arguing with you.
Wrong.
Say the rest of your thing. There's no way you're right on this.
That's fine. So in any case, yeah, they've played subpar offenses the last 4 weeks, which I'm sure DVOA takes into account. But it's one of those things where you want volatility, and it's entirely a ownership percentage play for me with Carr and Newton. Like if they're low owned, yeah, they're absolutely worth a shot. We've seen what Carr can do. We've seen high scoring games with both these teams several times. We've seen huge numbers be put up, and people are going to be off Carr a little bit, I think, because what they saw tonight, which is he still played well, but it was mostly towards the second half of the game. But it was in high altitude, and the field conditions weren't great. So, and Cooper and Crabtree really did not do that much throughout the course of the game. There was a lot of drops, and Carr actually should have had a whole bunch more yards if it weren't for Crabtree dropping balls all over the place. But I think if their ownerships are low, then I think they're great plays this week. If their ownerships are high, I think that they're just decent plays this week. But I don't believe in Carolina's defense that much, and we'll see if I'm right this weekend.
Yeah, I think I like Carr a little bit more than you do, Bobby, but I don't love them. I don't I do think that Carolina's defense has figured things out. Their pass rush has gotten better. They last year Ben Wickery looked like a good cornerback in their system, and then they cut him this year, and then he got picked up, I believe, by the Dolphins, and they cut him after a couple of weeks in spite of being pretty cornerback needy. I don't think Ben Wickery's an actual good cornerback, but just in their system, he looked good last year. And with James Bradbury,
you nailed it. I just want to acknowledge how much you're nailing it. Their system is what it's all about. I believe in that system. Yeah,
and I think that that's important too. I mean, you look at Pro Football Focus has, or at least last time I looked a couple of weeks ago, David Amerson and Steve Smith, or Sean Smith, the Raiders' 2 cornerbacks, were both top 12 cornerbacks, but their system, their defensive system does not lend itself to, the talent of those guys shutting down opponents. Whereas Carolina has, a system where it's tough once they get going to really put up points against them. So that's kind of my take there. I'll look closely at Carr, but probably not end up using him. Cam's red zone usage, as far as I think he has seven carries inside the 5, maybe 5 carries inside the 5 this year, which is low for him. And he's outside of the top 20 in red zone pass attempts. So they're just not using a ton of Cam in the red zone at all, which is the only thing that really concerns me there. But he's definitely, like Bobby said, a viable play in any matchup, let alone against Oakland. We're going to move on to Love at First Sight, where we take a quick look at some of the early games that stand out to us. It's a weird week. Taking away the Thursday games and the Monday night game, we have only 2 games right now with an over-under of 47 or higher. That's without a line yet in the Oakland-Carolina game. But Patriots and Jets are pegged at 47 right now. That game in Atlanta between the Cardinals and the Falcons is pegged at 50.5. Everything else is below that, which is really low week across the board. So, Grant, what do you have for us? Love at first sight. Let's get a love at first sight story from you and your favorite game heading into the week.
So fell in love this weekend, went out to a bar, and the waitress started hitting on me very, very much so. And my first thought is, man, she must have low self-esteem because this mustache is disgusting and no one in their right mind would go after this. Then she brought me beer throughout the course of the night. She brought me a sippy cup to drink beer out of. Everything was going perfect for me. And then randomly in the conversation, it gets brought up. Thanksgiving dinner. She's like, oh yeah, I'm making it. And then you hear the third worst thing you can ever hear from a woman besides, I'm pregnant and it's yours. And she said, I don't eat meat, which is why your tweet this week is very ironic, because then I was just done with her completely. But guy that does eat a lot of meat and produces a lot of children, Phillip Rivers. Oh my gosh, San Diego's back again. Hardest week of my life, not having them play last week. They're going against Houston, which they're putting up. No one's really putting up huge fantasy numbers against them, aside from Derek Carr, kind of fluky this last night. I mean, their defense is pretty darn good, but I don't care. It's San Diego. Every game, every single time is a shootout, high scoring. I still think they have like the third most points scored this season. And I just love Rivers. I love Williams. I love Benjamin if he's healthy. I love Gordon. I absolutely love Gates. And then on the Houston side of the ball, I think that all the guys are in play. Like the run defense is a little bit better than they're given credit for. I'd say this almost every week, but their pass defense isn't the same with all the injuries that they have. I'm not sure if Flowers is back. I can't quite remember. But regardless, their passing game isn't that great. And I think that Osweiler could do well because I think they're going to be throwing from behind. And I think that that means that then San Diego gives up a lot of huge plays. So Fuller could be in play and Hopkins can be in play. And that's my love.
Nice. I kind of figured that it was going to be San Diego for you after a week of sadness away from them. Bobby, any quick thoughts on that game? And then what's your game that you're eyeing early in the week?
Well, first of all, that was my game. That was the game I was going to choose. So I obviously like that game as well. I think it's a great call. I think there's a really good chances for really good options on both sides of the ball. Anything to hate about it, I also think the ownership will be lower than it should be, as it always is in these ones. I don't know. I really think I see both sides. I just have a very hard time with Osweiler, like ever thinking about him. But other than that, I think everybody's viable. I love that you can start getting Hopkins and guys like Fuller who have big game potential, and you can even switch them. But like Hopkins at 6,300, against, I think a very, very rated. They're bad. They're worse than their 18th, to wide receivers shows. They're not good enough. I really think there's a lot of good spots in that game. Anyway, I like that game. The other game, now that I'm forced to choose one, I want to say Arizona-Atlanta because if I'm looking at my early week lineups, they are Arizona-Atlanta focused, but I'm going to focus more on the other game that's a little bit weird after what I said about Mariota because it's Tennessee-Chicago. I think there's some real opportunities, especially just because the Chicago value on their side of the ball. You can take multiple receivers in that game and have a chance. I know how bad Cutler's looked and what situation they're in.
So this evening, too, I don't know if you saw this, but Cutler, they said he might have a season-ending injury.
You know what? That makes me like the game better.
Which would mean Scott Tolzien, the quarterback for the –
I'll take it. Man, anybody who can throw for 200 random yards, that means Cameron Meredith is going to get like 14 targets with his size and the pass-catching ability. I'm just trying to like wing it because I didn't know that information before I said that. But
no, it's
that
true.
does change things a little bit.
If Zach Miller is going to be out, Alshon Jeffrey's obviously out. You have Eddie Royal and Cameron Meredith, and whoever's going to be filling in at tight end. Like targets are going to have to go play.
Yeah, exactly. I would set the over/under at targets for Meredith at 10 or 11. Like, for 4,100, that's crazy. Like it's just. How do you not like consider that guy? Or 4,700, I should say. Arizona Atlanta would be the more obvious game to target.
I just don't really. I still think more of Arizona's defense than most people do, and I think the game will probably be overdrafted because of the over/under. So that's why I was trying to stay away from it. But honestly, the San Francisco, I don't like Miami side of San Francisco side of it, but I do think there's a lot of viable options on Miami side of it. I just think Ajayi is like the best play of the week by a million miles, and he'll be drafted that way too. But he's going to run for 200 yards this week. I don't know. I can't really pick an exact game if I just because I got that new information. Other than that, though, because those were my other two games were San Francisco, Miami, and Arizona, Atlanta. But I don't feel committed enough to either one of them to say anything.
Yeah, I think on a week like this where there are so few high over-unders, there's not going to be a ton of appealing games to just game stack, which makes sense then that, you kind of end up gravitating toward, well, I like this side of the ball in this spot or this side of the ball in this spot. And Ajayi, like I'm going to be gun shy because when I rostered him last week, I told a few people I don't think you can win a tournament this week without Ajayi, and then he put up like 9 points. But he is like the Dolphins run the ball so much right now, and they've won 5 straight games doing it. They're not gonna suddenly change. So we know that the volume will be there in a tremendous matchup. And honestly, with his high price, and people don't trust Ajayi yet, just because he's not a familiar, big, explosive fantasy name. I think the ownership's actually going to be kind of low on him. And
what's your guess, JM? What do you think his ownership will be? Yeah,
early in the week, I'd say 12% or lower.
Yeah, see, like at that, I'm going to be all over him. I don't care if he put up a couple of duds. Like it's GPPs. Like he's got the upside like that no one else will have at that ownership, and that's just crazy. It's like the same thing with David Johnson last week. He was 7.6% owned in the $300 buy and the 333. I had him in 25% of my lineups or whatever. Why is he 7% owned? It doesn't matter who he's playing against. It's David Johnson.
Yeah.
Period.
And with the Ajayi, I mean, he's currently, I believe, still Pro Football Focus #1 rated running back as far as rush grades, ahead of Le'Veon Bell, who's #2, ahead of David Johnson, who's #3 or 4. And his offensive line was a top 5 offensive line before losing Pouncey and Brandon Albert. I think Albert is supposed to be back this week, so that'll help. But 49ers have gotten trashed by not good running backs and not good offensive lines. So even if the Dolphins line is a little banged up, Ajayi is a strong play. Real quickly, I guess my game would be I'm going to take half of 2 different games. I'll take the New Orleans half of the game against the Rams and the Patriots half of the game against the Jets. Just, a couple teams that the Patriots have been like the 3rd run heaviest team in football, even with Brady back. But they are very matchup specific, and against the Jets, who have a great run defense and atrocious pass defense, I think we'll just see a ton of passing from Brady. And then Breeze at the Superdome, the Rams do have a very good defense, a good secondary, good personnel, good scheme. But if people aren't on Breeze, then he's a phenomenal play because Breeze at home is always a good play. So those are the 2 spots I'm looking. Grant, any quick final thoughts on these games before we move on?
Don't like Breeze as much as you. I think the Rams defense is just a lot better than even people think it is. I think they're a great defense, and I think that people are going to be on Breeze because they're always on him at home. New England, I can't remember who you just said they were playing. Oh, Jets.
Jets, yeah. Yeah,
their defense has been better lately, and I just hate Tim Brady. So I'm not terribly against him. I'm just not going to play them. Miami, I think Ajayi is one of the best plays of the week. Anyone against San Francisco 49ers running back is the best play of the week. And I think people are going to see that Blunt didn't really do as well last week. And that's just because they decided to pass the ball more. He's a great play week in and week out every single week. And one thing I really want to mention is that Chicago, Meredith, since Cutler came in, his targets just went right down the drain. So I think any other quarterback who's played for them this year has targeted Meredith a lot. And I think that just was a Cutler thing where he's going back to the guys he likes, the guys he's played with before. I think Bellamy and Wilson were both guys that got targeted more than Meredith this week, and those are guys that Cutler's played with before. So I think that he is going to see a lot more targets, and it's one of those things where Meredith is 4,700, Royals 3,900. They're going to be passing, I think, because I think they're going to be playing from behind. And Langford, I don't think, is going to do as much as he did this last weekend. So I think Royal, Meredith, and what's his name, Howard, are all completely in play and great plays, especially at the price point.
Bobby, any quick final thoughts before we move on to looking at some players?
No, I think that I like your spot. I think that makes sense. I mean, I like the New Orleans LA game. I do think that the Rams are an elite defense, but I also think that in those domes, they were prone to playing some shootouts over the last couple of years, still with an elite defense. And in those situations, I just think that game could get a little bit interesting. You might see a 3-touchdown game out of Gurley. You might see a 5-touchdown game out of Breeze. It's just one of those games. It's a little bit Coors, It's a little bit like playing Coors.
And to look at the, speaking of the games that we've kind of looked at, the current highest projected, like Vegas implied totals on Sunday are Atlanta, and then the Patriots, then the Saints, and then the Dolphins. Sometimes it's easy to look like, okay, Atlanta and Arizona, it's a high over/under, but like Arizona is actually their Vegas implied team total is lower than a lot of other teams because they're not expected to win in this game. That's always an interesting thing to me. But the Patriots are expected to win by over a touchdown, but because of that, their Vegas implied total is actually higher. So just to bring that up,
I just want to make a lock of the week. Maybe should be my bold call, but Arizona will win that game 100%.
Ooh, I like that for your bold call. We could all just take of course, then I guess if we were all right, we'd have to figure out which was the boldest call of all, but we could all take a bold win-loss call.
We can just go farthest away from the spread.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about some value plays in the Money Matters section. And just take a look at a couple guys that are standing out to each of us at each position as far as lower-priced guys. We'll start with quarterback, where, I don't really see a lot to love. If Jimmy Smith is – now, even if Jimmy Smith is out, I don't love Dalton because A.J. Green's going to be out. Which, can I just say, I rostered Tyler Eifert this last week. I did not like Martellus Bennett as we got closer to Sunday, which was correct. And I was trying to decide between Zach Miller and Tyler Eifert. And when A.J. Green got hurt, I was like, man, I don't know if Eifert was the right play or not with Green in there. But with Green out, Eifert's just going to beast. And then he got 6 targets against one of the worst defenses against the tight end, which was infuriating. Anyhow, that's a personal story that has nothing to do with the podcast. But yeah, under 6K at quarterback, there's just not a ton I'm seeing to like. I mean, Tyrod Taylor lost Robert Woods. They're saying Sammy Watkins is going to be back, but he's not. If he is, he's going to be back for a few plays. Jacksonville is third best at, passing yards allowed. There's just I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing anything below 6K that I would actually feel comfortable rostering. So I know, Bobby, you prefer to pay up at quarterback when you can. I imagine that there's nothing really in that range below 6K that you're loving either besides Carson Palmer.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for 1 second. Can you repeat the end of it?
Yeah, so I was saying you usually like to pay up at quarterback when you can anyway, so I imagine you're not seeing a ton to love. I imagine you like Carson Palmer. Is there anything else below 6K that you actually like?
I don't know about below 6K. I do really like Carson Palmer, and I think he's a really viable option. I'm happy to play him with David Johnson. You might see two TD receptions for him this week. I also think that they're at 6,300. I think Phillip Rivers is going to go under-owned against a Houston D that I expect him to light up in Houston. So I really like him. And I know it's a little over 6,000, but yeah, I think it's a great play. I mean, it doesn't need to be exactly under 6,000 for it to be a great value play. I also think that if you want to take a real shot, there is something about Tyrod Taylor that I like this week. I can't really put my finger on it. Jacksonville is a good pass defense. I need to do more investigating on how they are against good running quarterbacks, but I've watched them play really against a lot of traditional drop back quarterbacks. I haven't watched them play too much against running quarterbacks, and I think that guys like him are always worth rostering. I'm always looking to pay up, like you said, but I'm mostly looking for guys who can run for a touchdown, maybe 2. That's the real game changer when it comes to GPPs for quarterbacks.
Or catch a touchdown pass like Russ Wilson. If you could predict that, you'd be in great shape.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was his first ever, so let's not like get crazy with it.
Grant, quarterback, anything you seeing in the value sense that you can like?
Well, he's right with Taylor. Jacksonville hasn't played any good running quarterback, so that's up there. But he is, I think, one of the most efficient passers in the NFL so far this season, strangely enough. And he is one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the entire NFL. So he could easily rack up a whole bunch of points. But besides that, Josh McCown is 5K. He's Josh McCown. I love this man. He's 5K. He's minimum price. And we've seen it before, him put up 50 passes. He's got a lot of good pieces around him. Duke Johnson can catch the ball in the backfield. He has Pryor and Coleman, who I think are both underrated wide receivers, and they're actually a lot better. And he's got Barnage. I mean, we've seen him the last few weeks where he's not getting a full complement of snaps in practice because Kessler's in there, and then Kessler gets pulled halfway through the game, so he can't even find a rhythm half the time. But he, I think, is going to be one of the best point per dollar quarterbacks on the week this week. Other than that, Bradford against Detroit, we've seen Keenum light him up. I mean, anyone can light up Detroit. And with the way they're running this offense now, he could have a whole lot of passes and a whole lot of completions in there. Osweiler against San Diego, they keep every game close and every game's high scoring. Tannehill against San Francisco, they're an awful defense. I don't suggest him too much. And then Palmer, obviously, I said, is one of my favorite quarterbacks of the week.
Let's move on to running back, where there is potentially a lot of value depending on injury news. Tim Hightower is 5,400. If Mark Ingram's out, he's obviously the lead back. Jonathan Stewart's 5K against Oakland. He doesn't catch a lot of passes, but there's that. Doug Martin's fully healthy, touching the ball a ton. He's only 4,900. He is playing Seattle, but that's interesting. Grant, your boy Carlos Hyde is still only 4,800. Mike Gillislee's 4,600 if LaShawn McCoy misses. Chris Ivory is 4,200 if TJ Yeldon is out, which he should be. Chris Ivory had 6 catches this last week on 6 targets. I mean, he's never really been used in a pass catching role, but he can catch the ball. If you look at his targets and catches this year, he's caught about 80% of his targets. So Ivory's in play against Buffalo. And then I don't think I would use Jeremy Hill against what is probably the best run defense in football. But Giovanni Bernard is out, and Jeremy Hill is 3,900 against Baltimore. So definitely a lot to like from a volume standpoint from lower-priced guys, with potential for more stuff to open up throughout the week. Then the last note on running back is James White and Dion Lewis are basically splitting the pass-catching role right now. But in a game where the Patriots project to throw over 50 times, each guy could be viable under 5K. So anything I overlooked, Bobby, at running back? Anything else that stands out to you?
I'm pretty sure you just about nailed it. I was going through it. I like most of the calls you made. I'm always interested in Hyde. I don't really care about the matchup so much. It's just the upside's always there again. As far as GPPs go, like there's just the upside's always there. So I think he's always worth rostering. I think Martin is interesting for a similar reason, just on number of touches. And Ivory at 4,200 is completely in play. Like, I mean, he has a chance to go off. He actually has 30 fantasy point potential, and for 4,200, you're not going to find much better. So I don't really know who else to mention, but I really I love those guys.
Grant, any thoughts on running back guys that you feel have a high floor and a high ceiling?
Yeah, you mostly nailed him. One guy to point out is, I don't know if you said Tevin Coleman, but I think he's coming back this week, and we've seen him do ridiculous things out of the pass catching game. And even with him out, they still kind of did that 2-back system a lot of the time. So he's a possibility at 4,700, I think. I don't know if you mentioned Rob Kelly, but I think that's the Thursday game anyways. Dion Lewis, I completely agree. But Hill, I think that I don't care if it's a great run defense. It's Hill. Bernard's not in there. We've seen what Hill can do. He can snag a whole bunch of touchdowns. They're without A.J. Green, so they're going to be relying on the run game more probably. I think that at 3,900, you're getting a guy with a guaranteed amount of touches and with huge goal line implications. And it's one of those things where at 3,900, I don't see why not. Like, why is he not a great play?
Because I think it's impossible for him to get you 20 points. I mean, that's why I wouldn't use him. But that's my take. I don't think he's going to be involved in the pass game. I forget who they have. I think it's like Rex Burkhead or something. He's going to come in and fill the Geo role. So I don't think Hill actually sees more touches than he was seeing before. I think he still sees his normal 15 touches, and it's tough to get more than 40 yards against this defense with those touches. That's my take. But it's still early in the week, obviously. Grant, any rebuttal on that before we move on to wide receiver?
He got 20 touches against Miami. Granted, he didn't put up huge points there, but he can get multi-touchdown games. So the upside is definitely there. And anytime you have that low price of a running back, I still think he has guaranteed at least 20 touches. I think it offers enough of a floor where I don't think it's a problem. And like I said, those possible goal line carries without AJ Green to throw it to in the end zone. All they really have is Eifert and LaFell, which, I mean, they're decent options, but they're not great. They're going to rely on the running game more around the goal line, and I think that he's a possibility for a big, big ceiling.
All right, so wide receiver, under like 5K is just stacked. There's so much to like. So I'm going to say, let's each mention 3 guys. Bobby, I'm going to start with you. Grant, you usually have a lot of value guys you like at wide receiver, so I'll throw it to you second and let Bobby take 3 guys first, and then I'll finish us off at this position. So Bobby, who are 3 guys under 5K who stand out to you at first glance early in the week?
Cameron Meredith at 4,700. Tajay Sharp at 3,700. I think that's going to be a really under-owned one. He had 7 targets last week and 4 catches for 69 and a touchdown. 3,700 is a really good price. I know they're spreading it around in Tennessee, but I do see him looking more Sharp's way recently. And we're talking about wide receiver. I was almost mentioning some tight ends here for a second. I think anytime Alan Hearns is below 4K, I do think there's huge upside there for multi-touchdown games because of his history of red zone targets with Bortles, even going back to last year mostly. I just think that's a reasonable spot for 3,900 to take a look. Same thing with the weirdest, I hate saying Eddie Royal. I know Grant loves him, but I think Eddie Royal is very reasonable at 3,800. Those are the guys who I thought of off the top of my head. I don't really have a whole lot extra to add to them. I'm sure you guys have interesting ones to say yourselves, and I'll let you take it away.
All right, Grant, who are you seeing outside of those guys who stand out to you at first glance below 5K?
Well, I mean, either of the Cincinnati guys. I mean, we saw – I don't know if Jimmy Smith's going to be out this week. You say he is?
No, I think he's going to return, but we don't know anything at this point.
I mean, if he does return, that makes Boyd a great, great play. If he does not return, then both of the guys are in play, LaFell and Boyd. Corey Coleman, I mean, we've seen what Mccown can do with him. He had 12 targets last week. He's only 4,200. I think that his floor is really high and his ceiling is very high. At 4,200, that's a great price. Humphreys, you're going to have Evans locked up with Sherman and maybe even double teamed on top of that. So he's a great play, I think, at 3,700. They're going to be coming from behind because Seattle's going to put up a bunch of points, I think. And then any of the Seattle wide receivers, any of them. Just take any of them. It's going to be a 5-touchdown game for Russell Wilson.
Bold call. Yeah, I mean, you guys basically hit the main guys that I would have mentioned. The main guys who stood out to me were Tyler Boyd at 4K, just got a ton of usage. This last week, I was very aware of it because I was hoping they'd throw to Eifert. Eifert has a incredibly difficult matchup this week, so even if they try to get him more involved, targets will be filtered toward wide receivers. So Boyd or LaFell, I like Boyd a little bit more. Tajay Sharp was back up to 90% of the snaps again this last week, whereas Kendall Wright is only playing about half the snaps. So really, Rashard Matthews and Tajay Sharp are the number 1 and 2 receivers there at this point. And Marquise Lee is, I think, supplanted Hearns as the number 2 guy in that offense. I don't mind the Hearns call either, but Marquise Lee is another guy in that same vein at 4K. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over any tight ends myself and just have each of you mention 1 or 2 guys who are standing out to you for cheap tight ends. As always, as we always say, there's usually a ton of of value available at tight end. But Grant, who are a couple guys that stand out to you at first glance?
This is the first time I haven't had a bunch of guys at the low end of the field. I mean, Charles Clay for Buffalo, he saw 7 targets this last week. And if Woods is out and Watkins is limited, that's going to funnel a lot more targets this way. So it really raises his floor, but I don't know how high his ceiling is. And then Darius Green, you have to check on how big his snap count's going to be. I think he had 8 this week of the 69 plays, and I need to see if that's going to be any better. But besides that, maybe Hunter Henry, depending on how much he's going to play, if they're going to do 2 tight end set a lot because of Gates. But there's really not much. Pay off a tight end this week and go with Gates or Kelsey.
Bobby, thoughts on the tight end position? Bobby, mic's on mute, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that. First of all, I don't think that was 1 or 2. I was just going to name everybody on Thursday is a great tight end play. They're all great. And my one guy that I'm going to mention is Ryan Griffin for Houston. I want to see how Fedorovich is after getting hit a few times pretty badly tonight. I want to see how he recovers. If not, Ryan Griffin at 2,500 could be a real steal against the San Diego team that has trouble covering that position. I think he's where I'm looking, actually. I think it's a really good spot, and he'll be way under-owned. And I'm just curious how Fedorovich heals, because he could barely walk at the end of that game tonight.
Yeah, and if Fedorovich plays, I like him too. I mean, that offense, the scheme doesn't emphasize the tight end, but that's clearly where Osweiler is most comfortable throwing, and they've kind of adjusted things to account for that. So, and as you guys were talking, it did bring up a couple of guys in my head. Just real quickly, Will Ty. Larry Donnell has been a healthy scratch the last couple of weeks. I mean, Ty is the tight end now. His upside is low in the way he's used, but he does have some athleticism, and he is a red zone target against Cleveland. He's a viable play this week, and Barnage in that same game, if Mccown plays, is viable as well. So we had some bold calls to make at this point. I have no idea what my bold call is just yet. So I don't know. Bobby, do you want to use the Arizona beats the Falcons and we all go with a team that wins, or
Arizona wins the game outright?
Yeah, that's your. I mean, if you want to make that your call.
Yeah.
All right. So if we all go an underdog winning on the Sunday slate, then I don't know, Grant, who do you have? Do you have anybody?
Shoot, I was sorting by. I fudged up. I was looking at all the favorites. If we're gonna go with some. I don't know. Is San Diego favored? I don't know. This is tough. This is really tough.
Yeah,
San
Diego's a pick 'em.
Shoot. All right. Cleveland's gonna win.
Oh, well, that made life easy on us all. I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'll say that Tampa beats Seattle, which I don't really think is going to happen, I do like that Tampa team, and I could see it happening.
You do realize they're going to lose by 25.
So the judgment on this should be how far away these teams finish from the Monday line. So, like, Seattle right now is favored by 5.5. The Giants are favored by 7, and Atlanta's favored by 4. So we'll judge who wins and loses based off of who got closest.
Yeah.
So yeah, if Seattle wins by like 3 touchdowns and the Giants only win by a touchdown, then I clearly lose because I was farthest away from the line. So that's how we'll play things this week, and expect probably an embarrassing tweet from myself or Grant next week, because Bobby's probably the closest to correct on this. But
Grant, firm mine up and then send it over to me, and I'll do it.
But yeah, so we got some tweets to go out tomorrow, and then probably Grant or I will have a tweet for you next week. Bobby, any quick final thoughts before we head out?
No, just play all the tight ends on the Thursday slate. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. There's a lot to be thankful for in life. Mostly that when you don't have basketball going well, you have football. And in my case, when football is going okay or not quite how you're hoping,
you always got basketball. So DFS is a beautiful thing, and good luck to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Grant, can you top that?
Yeah, if you are really hungover and you have a lot of cereal around, put a trash bag in a little waste bucket and pour yourself the biggest bowl of cereal possible. It'll actually be pretty fantastic, and it'll keep it not that soft. It'll keep it nice and crunchy.
There you go.
And play Josh McCown.
So speaking of Thanksgiving, last year I'd been back, I spent 6 weeks in Asia in August and September. So I've just been back in the States for like a month and a half. And as cheesy as it sounds, that's what I was thankful for last year, was that we live in the States, because no matter how good or bad things are in your personal life, we still have it a lot better than most other people in the world. So there's something to be thankful for on a more serious note than we usually hit on this show. But yeah, most of you probably aren't listening anymore by this point anyway. So there you go. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you back here next week, same time, same place, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend.
I'm thankful.